Is it wrong to consider women property? When people argue that it is wrong, it's usually in a casuistic sense, and it does not concern the validity of the concept in terms of its correspondence to an understanding which itself corresponds to the state of affairs in the world. Now, there are some arguments that go under the name formalism, which state that hierarchies are better for those involved, especially the subordinates, when they are formal, when they're visible. Because then the superiors not only have rights and perquisites, but they have responsibilities and obligations. So if the state of affairs is in fact that women end up being treated as property, and that's not to say just objectification and something that's imposed upon them, but if they internalize this mode of thought and act complicitly in the proprietarian arrangement of a marriage or a relationship, if that's the case, it's irresponsible not to acknowledge it, because then the man, although he effectively controls the woman and treats her as property, doesn't acknowledge the obligations that associate therewith. Now, are women in fact treated as property? There are a number of dynamics that suggest that yes, they end up being treated in this way. Probably foremost among them is that women are attracted to men of higher social status, and people in good hierarchies acquire social status through elevated innate abilities. They're quality people, they're competent people who acquire superiority in social hierarchies. So women are attracted to this, and men are primarily concerned with the physical displays of fecundity and fertility that guarantee an effective mating resource. And a man who wants to guarantee the paternity of the child has an obligation not only to secure the first encounter which begins the process, but also to protect and observe the woman who is the target of his desires. And that protection implies control. So women seek out men who will have the means of their own domestication. They seek out men who are superior, generally more intelligent. And if you put someone who is more intelligent with someone who is less intelligent, and that more intelligent person is also physically dominant, more powerful, higher testosterone, more aggressive, more assertive, all of the personality traits that go along with high status men, and just men in general to an extent. If you put them with someone who exemplifies feminine characteristics, you will have a degree of domination, and that domination breeds control and therefore a certain kind of ownership. Now, in the Bible, we are commanded as men to love our wives, to be compassionate, empathetic, and not mean. Be nice to your wives. That's basically what it's saying. And women are commanded to respect their husbands. It's not just love on both sides. The woman must respect and obey the man in a marriage, in the Christian conception. Now, the reason for this also stems from the tendencies in literacy in those days. So the man would be familiar with the scriptures and would have the ability to interpret them, and so could, in good faith, speak for God in the relationship. He represented the superordinate factor, corresponding to the divine subordination of Scripture. So that's where it comes from in Christianity, but more generally, any relationship in which one party is significantly more competent than the other should, not just for the sake of protecting the incentives and rewards of both parties, formalize the relationship, but also for the utility that comes with assigning the executive function to that party who is most capable of carrying it out. So instead of negotiating on every decision and reaching consensus as an equal partnership, if one of you is simply smarter and more capable of assessing the situation, that person should, by default, be given the right to make those decisions. Now, I find it difficult to understand how a counter-argument could be made for this. It is true that sometimes someone who's generally less competent will, in a specific instance, see something that the more competent person doesn't. And so they should have a voice. And they do. They do have a voice, even in jobs, in employment. Even though your boss is de facto the executive of the relationship, you still give feedback and you tell them your concerns, and a good employer will assimilate that information and adjust their decisions accordingly. The same would go in a traditional marriage. So, you look at the behavior of men and women, the whole goal of life, the American dream, the white picket fence, the house, the stable career, the family, that is all about primarily the man's pursuit of the means of supporting a woman and raising children, his children, with her. The house is his property, and he sequesters his primary mating resource within that domain and defends it, and the white picket fence is symbolic of that. So men act this way. Men have every incentive to act this way. They want to control the behavior of what they see as their women so that other men don't try to take advantage of them. They want to raise their children, not someone else's children. So men are going to act this way. Men are going to want to monopolize the mating resources of a given woman. And, well, the result is, especially considering that women are attracted to the men who are capable of actually succeeding in this, capable of their own domestication, the result is that relationships resemble ownership. And that's actually reflective of something from more or less postmodernism, existentialism, the master-slave dynamic, which is not in the Nietzschean sense, but in the sense of some of these other, mostly French thinkers, where all power dynamics in relationship eventually end up in a master and a slave. So that being the case, we can defy human nature and say that men and women ought to be equal, despite the fact that they're not built this way, psychologically or physically. Or we can say that, yes, well, in fact, a woman does want a higher status man, and that's how she will feel satisfied. So, if the man is higher status, he's probably more competent, and he'll be able to make decisions more effectively on average. Now, the man should love his wife and pay attention to what she says and care about it. But if we don't formalize that relationship, one being superior to the other, husband being superior to the wife, then every decision must be a result of consensus, and women, as men often are fractious and willful and not always entirely logical. And you'll have arguments that ruin the relationship for both parties. Whereas if it's simply given that the man is the executive of the relationship, then, well, the woman can give her feedback, but always respecting the man, and the man can then more easily show love for the woman because she's not constantly challenging him. So, should a woman be considered property? Should she be thought of as this? In actual fact, that's the way relationships tend to go. That's the way they pan out. We can ignore that and say that nevertheless they should be equal. But then, especially in an environment where marriage is less common, men will effectively own women without owning up to the responsibilities that come with that. And that's bad for women. And it's bad for the moral character of the man. So that's just my take on it. Thank you for listening.